Any thoughts on Queen Elizabeth II's passing? What does she represent to you? Thank you and much love.
I think that this is actually a pretty deep and not a simple matter. In principle, I am about as far from a monarchist as you could get. But in practice, I do wonder if the fact of the monarchy has an importance that is lost because of the anachronism of the monarchy. And what I said to the Patreon Coalition of the Reasonable group this morning was that, boy, this is tough, but it requires a weird analogy. Postmenopausal women do not, because they do not have the ability to produce more offspring of their own, their viewpoint should naturally tend towards the big picture and providing an environment in which the children and grandchildren that exist or will exist are embedded in a functional system, right? So you expect a kind of wisdom to evolutionarily emerge. If you compare that to, let's say, wealthy men who not only are physiologically capable of continuing to produce offspring, but may even have the opportunity to do it by virtue of their wealth, okay? You would expect them to be...
Of the same age was the control there.
Right. You would expect them to be narrowly focused jerks, right? And you would expect postmenopausal women to be big picture, trade-off balancing, lineage-oriented in their thinking, right? Polar opposites, effectively. And here's the odd fact. Monarchy is inherently a kind of corrupt structure because the power that it has tends to result in the abuse of that power, right? There's no magic by which good people end up as monarchs. And so you're going to get a lot of humans taking advantage of, in modern times, their tax-exempt status, but taking advantage of the power that a monarch has. And that's terrible. On the other hand, a monarch is only a monarch if their society continues to exist. And so you might imagine that as much as there are good monarchs and bad monarchs, that in general, the monarchy has a bias towards preventing a civilization from disappearing, right? Because it loses everything if the civilization it's embedded in disappears. And so it may be that monarchs are very rarely useful, but that because they are dependent on the society they're embedded in continuing to exist, they will tend to see hazards that others don't. I don't know that this is true. I don't know that it's been demonstrated to be true, but I leave open the possibility.
That a monarchy that exists along with like a parliamentary government or some such, as opposed to just having a monarch.
Well, this would be a feature of all monarchies, but in modern times, I think that here's the problem. People in general liked this queen, right? They don't in general like monarchy, but they like this queen.
I don't even know that in general is the right word. I feel like she was beloved in a way that with a universality that I think this has been said widely. So many people have spilled so much ink on her passing, but she was more beloved, universally beloved than anyone else I can think of.
Yes, and I think, look, I know very little about the Queen, but what I do think I know is that there's some interesting early story, something Jeep's wartime that she did, as royals sometimes do, she served effectively.
She was a real human being with real skills who was actually willing to get her hands dirty.
And she was, at least as far as I know, not an obvious abuser of power, right? She certainly benefited from a huge amount of privilege, but she was not, even in her interface with governance was careful. So we're going from a monarch that people generally liked to a monarch that people don't generally like, right? And the point is, the tendency to say, oh, well, now's the time to get rid of the monarchy because we don't really like Charles. Who needs a king, right? A, I agree that that's probably true. B, what do you give up that you don't realize is valuable because the periodicity of its value is so long. And do I want a king? No. Do I think Brits should want a king? My instinct is no, but I'm far from saying it's obvious that this has no purpose and, be done with it. I don't know is the answer. One should be cautious.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's also, I think, neither of us had particular, personal connection here. I had one moment of royal focus as a young person when Charles and Diana got married. On the west coast of the U.S., I got up early and I watched the wedding, even though I did not have princess fantasies. That was not the kind of kid I was at all. But something about that story really drew me. Of course, it was revealed very quickly to be nothing like the fantasy that we were told it was. But in none of that did Elizabeth ever. No one ever blamed her for any of her decisions, even when she made unpopular ones, and I can't think of any at the moment, but I'm sure she made wrong ones. But she was always honest and forthright and careful and owned her mistakes, I believe. But I think one of the things that is so unusual, so I guess, and we didn't prep for this at all, but I guess she was the longest reigning British monarch, even longer than Victoria, who similarly had, I don't know that she was as beloved, but Victoria's death through all of, the dog's gonna push my computer over here, all of British society was just in uproar when Victoria died, and time moved more slowly then. It wasn't a global economy. And so part of what that was this is all we've ever known. For the vast majority of humanity, then with Victoria, but especially now with Elizabeth, to the extent that you were aware, even if you're not a Brit, even if you didn't care about the royals, whatever, Queen Elizabeth II was always just a fact of life. And so there's a way that the normal process of grief is, but wait, I thought that person I loved, I thought that animal that I loved was permanent. Everything about my experience told me that was permanent, even though, yes, I know death is real. Yes, it happens. But especially because this was someone whom almost none of us actually knew. She was just in the background, a fact of life. And obviously she was so old. It was going to happen at any moment. But it's still shocking to have that thing that, yes, intellectually is going to disappear, but it's always been there, so maybe it won't. Maybe this will be the exception. Our brains play these strange tricks on us. So I think a lot of people are also actually grappling with the reality of reality. And, not in a bad way, not in like a postmodern, silly, like, oh, I just didn't realize way, but just in the way that, even people who lose a loved one after a protracted battle with a disease, they know it's coming and they know it's a relief to the person who was dying and to some degree to their loved ones. It's still a shock. Wait a minute, but they've always been there. The hole that it leaves is huge. And so I think the fact that she was apparently, by all accounts, an incredibly good human being, and that she no longer is, and she was for so long, that combination is rendering many people incapable of knowing exactly how to proceed.
Well, there's one note of caution I want to add to this. So I've talked to a number of people in the aftermath of her death, including a couple of Brits and a Canadian, for whom the Queen is still a relevant person in a way that I don't entirely understand, but as a Commonwealth nation,
yep.
Queen is a significant factor. But in any case, the point is, one person in particular alerted me that they are feeling oppressed by the enforced period of mourning, and that it is not just simply the flag is at half-mast for somebody you have misgivings about or something, that it is actually an active process in which you are told that you are going to engage in, 30 seconds of silence for the Queen, and if you opt out by leaving, you will be understood to be, somehow other. And this always troubles me, right? To the extent that, look, it's 2022. There is an obvious question about whether a monarch has a place in a Western democratic republic, right? That's simply a real question. It cannot help but be one. And the idea that one is it is not the fact of Elizabeth that is causing the state to effectively mandate mourning. It is the fact of a monarch having died. And so I guess the note of caution would be, for those of us who are concerned about abuses of power, about the West and the thing that makes it unique but also makes it fragile, the idea that there will be effectively an authoritarian insistence on a perspective on monarchy for citizens of a Western democratic republic, I do find that disturbing. It's one thing if Britain or Canada or Australia or New Zealand find themselves organically in mourning and leave room that some of their members may not feel that way, right? But, you know, when John F. Kennedy was shot, nobody told the public, you will now feel bad. The public felt bad, right?
Yeah.
Was there room for somebody not to feel bad? Formally, yes. How would it have been socially to not feel bad? I don't know. But I think the point is there is a difference between Britain organically finds itself mourning this person who is suddenly gone, and the state is now going to force you to mourn. I think those two things look a lot alike, but they're really very, very different.